Now, since I'm chairing, I can ask, are there any questions from the floor?
Kevin, great talk. This will sound a bit facetious, but one interpretation you can put on what you presented is that spectators are being shortchanged. They're not getting to see as much game as they used to. And certainly from Australian football perspective, the AFL ties itself up in knots by changing rules regularly to try and reduce game speed. One simple way they could do that is obviously to instruct the umpires and the referees, for soccer and rugby as well, to move the game on. Has that been suggested at all?
Well, it certainly has in AFL. There's no question that, and that's been made public to all the clubs, that would be a directive several years ago in an effort to make the game more continuous and perhaps take the high-end speeds out of the game. In soccer, I'm not sure. I'm not close enough to soccer to have a good feel of it. It's not up to someone like me to suggest how they might change their game. But when I watch soccer from an amateur position, if you like, I like the tension, the drama of a set shot for goal, and to see someone swing a ball 2 metres and so on. I don't really think about the physiological consequences at that time. I'm a spectator, if you like. So I don't know whether it would be good to reverse that back to the 60s where it was much quicker. And because it's not a collision sport, or it's not designed to be a collision sport, I imagine the administrators of soccer, FIFA, don't have the same level of concern about player safety and welfare that you would in the AFL if you allowed a minute recovery or a minute and a half, as it was drifting up to for some players for a set shot for goal. A minute and a half in a collision sport means when you start the game again, everybody's fresh and ready to go, and that's very dangerous in rugby's and Australian footy. So in terms of soccer, probably most people wouldn't even notice it's gone from 70% down to 50%, but that's why it's probably a little more theoretical from that perspective in soccer. Do we have any other questions? Okay,
Thanks for that, Kevin. My question comes with the accelerometer data, and it's something that I personally like. My understanding is it's not peer-reviewed very well, and there are many different ways of calculating those G-forces from the tracks or measurements you get from the GPS unit. How confident are you in using that data in a academic or practice sense?
I think it's
those
good.
Limitations.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I'm not confident in the absolute values of G-forces that I showed. I think it's the point I was making was the relative change from acceleration to deceleration. I mean, to put it into perspective, we had in the early days with the GP Sports units, we taped several together on the same person and had a look at, the body loads and G-forces and so on, and they were, and I'm sure this is not a criticism of GP Sports. I'm sure they've improved since then, and this was the early days, and there were sometimes literally tenfold differences in G-forces. But for what I'm presenting here, it's not so much the absolute values, it's the relative change from an acceleration to deceleration. So I'm reasonably confident that we can do it multiple times and always see the same thing. But the point I was making is that I think in the early days the accelerometers were quite cheap. And and in Australia we actually had them in cereal boxes as part of pedometers. That's how cheap they were, probably 20 cents or something. So, and I'm not suggesting GP Sports had the 20-cent model, but they had very early day models, and they've probably improved a lot. But in the early days of accelerometry, and perhaps even with some models now, I'm yet to be convinced that that the absolute values are truly representative of the G-forces that we we think they are.
Okay, just one more question to add on to that. There was an intense focus on the velocity profile and finding a velocity above which we call high intensity versus below which we call low intensity.
Yep.
And it appears to range somewhere around 13 to 15 kilometres per hour, about 3 metres per second or so. What's your view on that potentially being going down the wrong line, and the fact that with most team sports, most of the velocity work actually occurs at what we're now determining as low intensity, in terms of those instantaneous accelerations and power movements that are 1, 2, 3 seconds, getting nowhere near peak velocity, but obviously are predominant in the sport, whether it's rugby league, rugby union, soccer or AFL. So my question is, and obviously we're limited by the equipment that can measure those instantaneous velocities, do you feel that this focus on high intensity velocity is going in the wrong direction, and we should look for more sensitive equipment and focus on the lower duration movements, which again happen hugely in terms of their frequency?
Yeah, I agree that in all of those sports that you mentioned and I covered, the explosive power, the ability to, to beat someone over 3 or 4 metres to the ball, or to accelerate away from someone with the ball, is critical. Whether it's football, rugby, it's all, but we don't have, I think, at this stage, the equipment to be able to measure that. And so it's almost like a default. The next best thing we have that represents high intensity effort is perhaps high speed. What can we get? And that's probably more satisfying, that we can get something that represents what we all know to be critical, and that is short, high power, high speed efforts. But at this stage, I'm not confident we can actually get that with any of the equipment, including GPS.
So crystal ball gazing, and Mark's obviously an expert in this area, would it be possible that acceleration, deceleration over short durations are going to become the critical measure, along with stress or G-force or body load measures on intermittent sport athletes, as opposed to what we're currently doing?
Well, if I could invent something that could do that, I would be going for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Sorry,
can I just ask, from what I understand, the technology is available, whether it be a GPS unit or anything else. If you go into the raw data, you've got a position and you've got time. And we can argue about the accuracy of that, but from that data you should be able to calculate acceleration and deceleration. Just to add on to the previous point, whether it's G-forces or decelerations, I think what you present is valid. What goes up must come down, and that's going to place a considerable stress on an individual. So yeah. I think there are team sports out there are clearly using acceleration and deceleration by ignoring the software that's available and being a little bit more intelligent about the raw data that's in there. And Tim presented some nice stuff yesterday, where they were using video footage to validate movements from a GPS unit.
That's good point. I agree. Did you have a question? No, okay. All right.